Welcome back, and now to the news in detail. In Yemen, Houthi rebels say 30 people have been killed in airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition in Al Jawf province. The Houthis Al Masirah TV reports that the bombing hit a crowd near the wreckage of a coalition warplane that the rebels claim they shot down. It said women and children were among those killed. Earlier, Houthis claimed they downed the jet using an advanced surface-to-air missile. But a spokesperson for the Saudi-led coalition says the jet crashed during an operation to support Yemeni forces. He did not specify the cause of the crash. Yemen has been entangled in violence since 2014 after Houthi rebels overran much of the country, including the capital Sana'a. UN says tens of thousands of Yemenis have been killed since then, while another 14 million are at risk of starvation. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu says differences over Syria's Idlib shouldn't affect Ankara's ties with Russia. He said this while meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Çavuşoğlu said stakeholders mustn't allow the problems in Syria to undermine mutual cooperation and relations. Lavrov says Moscow, Tehran and Ankara do not have coinciding goals in Syria. Meanwhile, Ankara has announced that a Turkish delegation will visit Moscow next week to hold talks on clashes in Idlib. Tensions between Ankara and Moscow have risen after the Syrian regime relaunched its push to recapture the northern province. The United Nations has called on Syria, Turkey and Russia to take steps towards a de-escalation of the situation in Idlib. UN General Secretary spokesperson Stefan Dujarric says a ceasefire is necessary to ensure humanitarian access to the region. Dujarric said the UN wants the conflicting parties in Syria to end violence and fighting. The statement comes after Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused Russia and the Syrian forces of targeting civilians in Idlib. He said Ankara will not tolerate any further violations of the truce in Syria. Tensions are high in the region after clashes between Turkish and the Russian-backed Syrian forces in Idlib. In its latest report on the Syrian refugees, the UN head of humanitarian affairs says 20,000 people have fled Idlib in the last 2 days. UN official Mark Lowcock says more people have fled the country in the last 10 weeks than at any other time in the 9-year conflict. Watch more in this report.
As they move, people check the sky and wonder if they're about to be bombed. In the bone-crushing cold, Syrian refugees travel in open trucks or on foot, day and night. They're heading to the Turkish border.
We fled 5 days ago from the western province of Anjara near Aleppo. We escaped the airstrikes and shelling. The journey was very difficult. It was cold, we couldn't find a car, and we kept walking until we found a car to take us here.
Most camps are full. Many sleep in the open, in fields where they struggle to keep warm in the harsh winter conditions.
We didn't have any money. We kept looking around but couldn't find a car, and we were surrounded by airstrikes. We are now here in a camp near Afrin, staying in a tent just to get by. The past 3 days have been cold on the road and on the streets.
In Syria's official population of 17 million, 5.5 million people are living as refugees in neighbouring countries. 6 million others have been uprooted within their country. More than 800,000 Syrians have fled since December 1st, and the exodus is expected to continue.
In Iraq, 4 people are killed in 2 separate attacks in the eastern part of the country. Police say ISIS attacked a security checkpoint in Diyala province's Boriz area, killing 2 officers. Officials said a husband and his wife were also found dead inside their home in Boriz. Authorities have launched an investigation into the incident. Since late 2017, the Iraqi army and the US-led military coalition retained most of the territories lost to the terrorist group. Despite largely eradicating ISIS presence, it has continued to conduct sporadic attacks in Iraq. In India, thousands of people, including a large number of women, have protested against the controversial citizenship law in Mumbai. The demonstrators chanted slogans against Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah. The protesters converged at Azad Maidan from various parts of Mumbai. They demanded the new citizenship law be repealed in the current parliament session. Huge rallies were also taken in Chennai and Kolkata. Earlier, the Chennai police battery-charged the people demonstrating against the controversial Citizenship Act in the city. Human rights activists and civil society have termed the new law discriminatory and anti-Muslim. The Indian government has charged the occupied Kashmir's politician Shah Faisal under the controversial Public Safety Act. Last week, occupied Valley's former chief ministers Mehbooba Mufti and Umar Abdullah were also arrested under the stringent law. Under the law, the Indian government can keep a person in custody for up to 2 years without a trial. Faisal was detained in August last year after his remarks against Delhi's annexation of Jammu and Kashmir. Last year, Faisal formed the Jammu and Kashmir People's Movement Party after resigning from the Indian Administrative Service. The valley is reeling under India's lockdown for the last 195 days. At the Munich Security Conference, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has rejected U.S. criticism of Beijing as lies. The statement comes after U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper accused China of employing a nefarious strategy through Huawei. More in this report.
US and China are still at odds over Huawei as world leaders attend the 3-day security summit in Munich. Speaking at the conference, Yi said countries have the right to protect their information security. He said it's important to provide a level playing field and a fair business environment for all companies. Yi also lashed out at US officials for criticizing China's foreign policies.
They basically say the same thing wherever they go about China, and I don't want to waste my time responding to each and everything they have said. What I want to say is that all of these accusations against China are lies. They are not based on facts.
Earlier, US Secretary of State defended Washington's global role while criticizing China and Russia's aggression. Speaking at the Munich conference, Pompeo was also critical of Chinese technology companies.
China has had a border or maritime dispute with nearly every nation bordering it. And let's talk for a second about the other realm, cybersecurity. Huawei and other Chinese state-backed tech companies are Trojan horses for Chinese intelligence.
Meanwhile, US Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said Washington is working to develop alternatives to Chinese 5G vendors. He said the US is already testing them at military bases.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for a closer dialogue with Russia in order to resolve differences. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, he said Europe's policy of defying Russia in recent years has been a failure. Macron said nobody wanted to confront Moscow directly, with dialogue being the only option. Meanwhile, Macron said he will allow North Macedonia and Albania to begin talks on joining the EU. He said if the bloc's executive gave them a positive review next month, it will pave the way to open the negotiations. Earlier, Macron refused to approve the start of the so-called accession negotiations, saying the process of admitting new members needed to change. Foreign ministers from world powers will discuss the implementation of the Libya ceasefire and arms embargo in Munich Security Conference tomorrow. Earlier, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas welcomed the new momentum towards a lasting ceasefire in Libya. Maas said UN Security Council decision has endorsed the outcome of the Berlin conference after long and difficult negotiations. He said last week the military committees of the conflict parties had their first direct negotiations on a ceasefire. The foreign minister said the meeting will discuss the monitoring mechanisms and the implementation of the conclusions of the Berlin conference. Foreign ministers from the US, Russia, Turkey, Italy, France, and other regional actors are expected to take part in the meeting. Moving on to China, where 143 people have died in the last 24 hours from the new coronavirus, which brings the toll to 1,523. The National Health Commission says 2,641 more people are now known to be infected. That brings the total to over 66,000 across the country. More in this report.
With no sign of the outbreak ending, people are dying in hundreds, every day, and it's spreading. Egypt has confirmed a coronavirus case, the first in Africa. In China, to contain the virus, Beijing has instructed people entering the city to go into quarantine for 14 days or risk punishment. Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China will do everything it can to end the outbreak.
每个人都承担了责任。
In this country with 1.4 billion Chinese people, we are doing everything we can, leaving no stone unturned to contain this epidemic. This would be a great challenge to any country, to any leader worldwide. But China has done it. We cannot rule out the possibility that there are some challenges to China. However, we must see that the majority of countries have expressed the appreciation of what China has been doing.
在共同参与的
The World Health Organization says it will open an investigation into the coronavirus outbreak in China this weekend. The main focus will be how COVID-19, as it's called, is spreading and the severity of the disease.
I'm glad to say that the WHO-led joint mission with China on COVID-19 is moving forward. We expect the full team to touch down over the weekend. The mission consists of 12 international and WHO experts and a similar number of national expert counterparts from China.
The global health body is advising Japan not to go ahead with this year's Olympic Games in Tokyo. Japan is one of the most affected countries outside of China.
France has confirmed the first death from the new coronavirus in the country, becoming the maiden fatality in Europe as well as outside Asia. French Health Minister Agnès Buzyn says an 80-year-old Chinese tourist died after being hospitalized. Last month, France became the first European country to confirm cases of the virus. It has 11 confirmed cases of the disease. Previously, 3 deaths have been reported in Hong Kong, the Philippines and Japan. The deadly virus has now killed a total of 1,524 people. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will arrive in Pakistan on a 4-day maiden visit tomorrow. Guterres is scheduled to chair the international conference on 40 years of hosting Afghan refugees in Pakistan. In a statement, Pakistan's Foreign Office said Guterres will meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. It said Islamabad will apprise Guterres on Pakistan's perspective on all aspects of Indian-occupied Kashmir's dispute. The office said the Secretary General will pay a visit to Lahore and also travel to Gurdwara Kartarpur Sahib. It said Guterres' participation in the conference is a recognition of Pakistan's exemplary resolve in hosting Afghan refugees for the past 4 decades. The United Nations says it is optimistic on the peace talks between the US and the Taliban, calling them a step toward ending the Afghan war. In a press briefing, a UN spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, said the body is closely following the Doha talks. Dujarric said the organization's office in Kabul has been kept up to date. He said the ongoing talks are important for opening a way to the intra-Afghan peace talks. His statement comes a day before UN Chief Antonio Guterres' visit to Pakistan. During his stay, Guterres will chair a conference on Afghan refugees and meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and other top leadership. The US has imposed sanctions on Sri Lanka's army chief for alleged human rights abuses. Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva has been accused of committing extrajudicial killings in 2009 during the country's civil war. In a statement, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the allegations against Silva are serious and credible. He said Silva's human rights violations had been documented by the UN and other organizations. The sanctions will prevent the army chief and the members of his family from entering the US. Silva is credited with leading the decisive fight against Tamil Tiger rebels in the country's decades-long civil war, which ended in 2009. In Ethiopia, health officials say a nationwide cholera outbreak has killed 76 people. State media said the latest outbreak is severe in the regional states of Somali, Southern and Oromia. It said other regions affected by the disease are Tigray, Amhara, Harar, and the capital Addis Ababa. Ethiopia has been suffering from the recurrent outbreaks of cholera since April 2019. The outbreak has left hundreds dead and thousands of others sick. 40 people, including soldiers, have been killed in a spate of attacks in central Mali. Government officials say 31 civilians have died in inter-ethnic violence in the village of Ouagassogou. Authorities say 30 heavily armed men entered Ouagassogou, burning houses and looting livestock. They said the attackers arrived only hours after government troops left the area. Elsewhere in the country, an ambush killed 9 soldiers in the village of Benchia in Gao. The army said 4 others were injured without saying who carried out the attack. Central Mali has been gripped by ethnic violence since a militant revolt and brief takeover in 2012. In Germany, police have detained 12 men on suspicion of setting up a far-right terrorist organization aiming to carry out attacks against asylum seekers and Muslims. They were presented to a federal court in Karlsruhe today. In a statement, the Federal Prosecutor's Office said 4 of the suspects had formed the terrorist organization in September 2019. It said the suspects regularly coordinated with each other using their phones and social media. The other 8 men were arrested on suspicion of supporting the organization with money and weapons. The office also said the suspects wanted their attacks to create an atmosphere of fear resembling a civil war. Last year, Berlin launched a crackdown on right-wing political violence in response to the rise in hate crimes. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has threatened to arrest a US-backed opposition leader, Juan Guaido. Speaking to the international press in Caracas, Maduro said the day will come when Guaido will pay for his crimes. Maduro accused Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro of being behind terrorist threats. He criticized Spain for what he called a smear campaign against Venezuela. Earlier this week, officials allowed Guaido back into the country from a tour of the US and Europe despite a travel ban. Maduro said Venezuela's justice system will decide when Guaido should be imprisoned.
The day the courts of the Republic give the order to detain Mr. Juan Guaido for all the crimes he has committed, that day he will go to jail. That is a certainty. That day has not arrived, but it will.
Dubai has become home to the world's largest 3D printed building ever constructed. The structure took only 3 workers and a printer to be built.
Dubai is known as a city of opulence that constantly tries to outdo other tourist destinations. After Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, the city has now become the site of a new architectural feat. The largest 3D printed building in the world, with walls 31 feet high and 2 stories spanning 6,900 square feet.
We in Dubai municipality have started researching on 3D printing. We have done a very long research, came up with a beautiful building with a 2-story. It has been registered by the Guinness Records book as the first.
US company Apis Core built the structure using only one 3D printer, which was moved around the site by a crane. Using 3D printing instead of traditional labor, the production cost of the project was reduced from over $680,000 to around $270,000.
The city has changed quite a lot over the last 5-10 years, and there's a lot more requirement for affordable units. So if you're able to have an industry which is able to produce units at a cheaper rate because the costs are lower, because there's such a significantly lower requirement for labor within those, that means the end product is likely to be a lot cheaper as well.
The government says the building is a move towards sustainability, using local materials and efficient insulation to reduce energy consumption.
In Belgium, one company has introduced unlimited paid holidays for its employees. The company management says the plan will create more productivity, while workers themselves consider the proposal revolutionary. More in this report.
A multinational firm in Belgium has initiated a new holiday plan for its employees. Its workers can have paid leaves of a maximum duration of 2 weeks in addition to other leaves. The head of the firm, Geo Janssens, believes this plan will have very good effects.
The bigger goal that we have is to show that the workplace is not an enemy. Nowadays, in our economy, it starts to feel more and more often that the workplace is the enemy. Is generating frustration and burnouts. And it's kind of sad for something that you do the biggest part of your awakened life.
The scheme lets employees take many more holidays than allowed under Belgian law.
Well, it's quite a revolutionary thing, so we don't know yet the exact impact it's going to have. It remains to be seen how it will work in practice. Like, when would be the right time to take holidays, since we are actually quite busy. So I think I will probably not try so hard to make sure I have days left, which I used to do, at the end of the year. And I'll be taking days off when the weather is nice and the days are long.
The company's manager will authorize workers' holidays and will also distribute the extra workload. The employees will be able to request holidays even if they already requested all of their holidays for the year.
Pressure is on the objectives I have, which are quite high, quite demanding. So the way I see it is my goal is to reach these objectives. But making sure the workload is manageable, and that's all then my responsibility to take on that workload, to accept the workload, and also to work as efficiently as possible to make room for the holidays.
The new holiday plan will be available to employees from March onwards. This company has over 175 employees around the world, and the management has received many new applications since the unique announcement.
It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. The US has announced an increase in tariffs on Airbus planes imported from Europe to 15% beginning from March 18th. The United States Trade Representative's announcement comes days after President Donald Trump said a trade deal with the European Union will be re-evaluated. The duties have been at 10% since last October, when Washington hit $7.5 billion in European products with tariffs. Airbus says Washington's decision will hit US airlines, which are already facing difficulties. The European plane maker said it will continue discussions with its US customers to ease the effects of tariffs as far as possible. Industry executives in Europe and the US are waiting on new announcements from trade authorities amid rising economic tensions. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.